I was reading a story by Stephen King last night,
Mm.
and he introduced it similar to what you were talking about a minute ago. He said he was someplace and he saw someone throwing some change down a grating,
Yeah.
which is very peculiar. He's throwing money. So he said, hey, that's a good idea for a story. Okay, and he wrote a story about that, which I'm reading right now. But the interesting thing he said also was, when he saw that, it's as if there was a story out there already, and he didn't really have to exert that much effort. I mean, in other words, it's out there, and he has to just put it down. And that leads me to another idea. I don't know if, I guess one question I'm asking, does that ever happen to you? Like, the story is really out there, formed, I mean, you have to put the details in, stuff like that. But that leads me to another idea. There's a way of looking at time based on Einstein's theory of relativity, that we go through time-space, and everything that we're going to do is actually out there already. And our past is out there. We never really die,
I have a story for you.
That. So what I'm saying is all your stories are really out there someplace, formed, and you have to kind of discover it as you pass through time, space. Do you have that feeling sometimes?
I do. I do, but I bet you're shaking your head because it makes it sound, when King says that, Mr. Book every 3 months, he's a friend of mine. And when I finish a garden...
He writes very well.
And he's a great guy, and I particularly, for you young writers and not so young, if you haven't read his memoir on writing, it's really an excellent book. It's a great memoir of his youth, and he says some really fine and helpful things about creative writing. So I finished Garden last days. It took me 5.5 years. It was 880 pages. I write him a little note. He writes, I said, yo, Stevie, blah, blah, blah. I said, it took me 5.5 years, man, 880 pages. He says, yeah, we make fun of the accents and where we're from, so he calls me Andre, A-N-D-R-A-Y. Yo, Andre, I have an 800-page manuscript on my desk too, but it took me 2 months, not 5.5 years. I write back, F you. But here's the thing, though, and he talks about this really eloquently. I interviewed him on stage at the Songster Arena last December, and 4,000 people showed up. And he talked a lot about stories and novels as found objects. This feeling that when you're writing well, you're cooperating with this thing that's coming. And that's what I was trying to say in Lucy's class today. I do think that this creative writing thing is really deeply mysterious and beautiful. I'm going to get right to this time-space thing. One of the dangers of any fine art instruction, it seems to me, is that you run the risk of demystifying something that's deeply mysterious at its core. And we just have to honor that. For example, let's talk about people. We all know about sperm and egg and mitosis and meiosis. We all know how we got here biologically. We didn't. At one point, people didn't know that when men and women did that, that's why they had babies 9 months later. But we've known that for a long time. We know a lot about our bodies. We know our body's going to end. We don't know anything else. We can have our theology, our philosophy, our theories. Every generation has to wrestle with these universal big questions. I would submit to you that it's a mystery why the human soul needs stories. It's a mystery. You don't have to be a reader. Non-readers crave stories as much as readers. It might be TV, it might be gossip, it might be Twitter, Twatter, whatever the frig it is. Right? I would submit to you, though, in the same sense that our biology is not a mystery, the deeper mysteries remain. Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing while I'm on the planet? Why am I going to die? What happens after I die? Am I really just worm food, or is there more? And what I'm getting at is when I'm writing well, when I feel as if I'm writing well, which is once every 14 or 15 writing sessions, and I mean that, there's this sense that I've just stepped into an underground stream, and it's pulling me. It's really, I really identify with those water diviners. They've got this all of a sudden, oh! And that's what it feels, and that's what happened. That's what I mean about imagine versus making up. Marla felt real. She felt rooted in something real to me when this predator felt fake, dry. Here's a story for you. I worked in corrections in a halfway house as a counselor, Canyon City Penitentiary back in the 80s. These with hard-time maximum security men and women. And one of the guys was one of these anarchists, libertarians, part of the gang that killed some FBI agents in Wyoming. Really dangerous guy. But I liked him. I found him to be really, well, he was really provocative, but he was really smart. And we'd have these long talks. He wrote me off as just some cop figure, which I wasn't, but I didn't care. So I leave the job, and a year later, I find myself writing from the point of view of a guy like him who leaves the house, escapes from the halfway house, kidnaps a young counselor a lot like I was, but more conservative. And I get out the Rand McNally map. This is before computers, and I pick out an obscure back route through the Rocky foothills into Wyoming, all the way to Casper. In my story, the guy gets drunk on Grand Marnier, has a big knife, steals a car, kidnaps a kid, works his way up, and he gets shot just outside Casper, Wyoming. So I write the story. It's not published yet. I haven't even begun to send it out. I get a newspaper clipping from a colleague of mine. The man I based it on, his real name was Daniel McKelvey. It was such a good name for him, I called him Douglas McElroy in my story. A few days before, and this is months after I'd written the story, he kidnapped one of the guys, got drunk, had a big knife, stole a car, took the exact same tiny, obscure back roads I picked out on the Rand McNally map, because it was in the newspaper, and got shot in the exact same place in Wyoming, where he got shot in my story! So there is this mysterious thing of stepping into non-time. I am now writing a story about a middle-aged white guy with a lot of tuitions who wins the big lottery.